we're in the third week of a little summer sermon series called 30 Days to Live. Have you guys been enjoying this series? Have you taken it into consideration? Maybe it shifts your perspective. If you only had 30 days to live, how would you live? Well, the title of today's message is Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Ain't no mountain high enough to keep me from getting to you. No, you guys want to do a Sunday song? You want to sing along? Okay, just me and Dr. Vern up here. We'll start a little group. Ebony and Ivory part 2, right? Me and you, we'll just start a little duo. Have you ever watched a documentary on people climbing Mount Everest? Have you ever read a book about the people who climbed Mount Everest? It's intriguing to me to see people pay a lot of money and risk their entire life to reach the highest place on earth. I'll be honest with you, that does not sound appealing to me. Miss Amy asked me the other day if I wanted to run a marathon. I said, nope. Because you do know the reason why the marathon is 26.2 miles is because the guy dropped dead at 26.2 miles. That's why it's 26.2 miles. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That does not sound appealing to me. Now, what's interesting to me is a couple years ago, I told Miss Amy that I wanted to run a marathon before I turned the age of 40. And she was like, you don't want to do that. That doesn't sound fun. But now that I turned 41 and I upped my life insurance policy this year, now she's trying to get me to run a marathon. So I'm starting to... But mountain climbers, they climb Mount Everest in 48 below zero weather. I ain't doing that. I like my fingers and toes way too much. And most people rarely or barely make it to the top. In fact, only about 50% of those who start the climb actually reach the summit. The highest has ever been, I think it was in 2016 when 60% of the people, they did it. And here I am, I'm watching these documentaries and I'm sitting on my couch eating my Snickers and I'm sweating because I'm so stressed. I feel like I'm risking my life just watching these people actually risk their life. You know, Mount Everest is over 29,000 feet tall. And when you reach 26,250 feet, you enter what they call the death zone. And the altitude is so high that it can't sustain human life at that level. The body is unable to acclimate to such a low level of oxygen that you can't stay in a death zone for very long or you will die. In fact, there's still 100 dead bodies scattered over Mount Everest. And that's what happened to a climber in May of 2006. He was left by his fellow climbers in the death zone so that he could rest while they pressed on. Now, several other climbers passed by him knowing that he was in trouble, but they assumed that his teammates would rescue him. Well, not long after his death, another climber, Lincoln Hall, was rescued by a party of 4 climbers who gave up their own summit attempt to stay with and then finally descend with him, and Hall was able to fully recover. And the question that I want to ask as we get started is, what made the difference between the survival of one and the death of another? And I think the answer is unselfishness. There was a group of people who was willing to put another person's life before their own. And unselfishness is the key to life and death on the mountain. And not only is it key to life and death on the mountain, it's the key to survival in marriages, on the job, in parenting, being a good neighbor, or just in fact being a good citizen. But I think you would also agree with me that unselfishness seems to be the exception these days. Athletes hog highlights. Influencers crave the camera. Government leaders vote their pocketbook above our pocketbook. Corporate bosses are raiding their own companies for personal profit. Individual agendas are constantly competing, sabotaging the goal that's best for everyone. And selfishness is the bedrock of sin. In fact, most relationships fall apart because of selfishness. And I want what I want, and if you won't give it to me, won't give it to me when I want it, then most people just say, I'm out of this relationship. And it's hard to put other people in front of ourselves. There's this whole survival of the fittest thing and fight or flight, so it's really just hard to give up our needs for other people. So we have competing agendas, and they are preventing us from communicating clearly and serving one another daily. So as we're in this series called 30 Days to Live, If we were counting the days before we left earth, I think that we would look for ways to enjoy our most important relationships. And relationships are the greatest area of regret when people look back over their lives. Bonnie Ware wrote in her book, The 5 Regrets of Dying, that most people don't realize the full benefits of their friends until their dying weeks. There are many regrets about not giving friendships the time and effort they deserve. And many miss their friends and regret on their giving up on love too soon. Do you have any regrets in your relationships? I'm sure that you do. Does any of you in here today miss old friends? Of course. So how can we live a life where we don't have any, or at least fewer regrets when it comes to our relationships? In John chapter 13, verse 1, it says, it was just before the Passover festival when Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, watch this, he loved them unto the end. On the night of his betrayal and last free night on planet Earth, he gave us a powerful demonstration of love when we don't have long to live. So what is it that keeps us from loving while we are living? I think there are 3 relational mountains that we all face in our relationships, and no matter what relationships they are. Let's continue on before I get to those 3. Verse 2, the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and he had come from God and was returning to God. So because of Jesus knowing who he was, he knew his identity, he could serve humanity in the form of a humbling activity and not lose his identity. He was secure in who he was so he could serve other people. Let's read on. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. And Simon Peter said, then Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. When we read this passage, and we'll continue on here in just a moment, we see a few relationship mountains. The first one is misunderstanding. The apostles couldn't quite understand Jesus. They wanted an earthly king, and Jesus was a heavenly king. They wanted Jesus to condemn sinners. He came to save sinners. He ate with sinners. He suppered with prostitutes. And none of this made sense to the apostles. And a result of this, it led to many misunderstandings. And so much of our conflict in life finds its roots in misunderstanding. You know, in the beginning of every relationship, everything is positive. You're not climbing a mountain together. You're floating on a cloud together. And we assume that it's always going to be this way. Then all of a sudden you realize that your coworker or that your partner or that your friend is not perfect. And the differences that were once endearing are now annoying. And the things that drew you together like Velcro now begin to rub you wrong like sandpaper. And the reality is they didn't change, but your familiarity with this person has now brought contempt toward this person. Something that you were once willing to overlook, now you can't see past. And we don't look past what was said to ask, what did you mean? And because we don't take the time to ask what they meant, now we just fill in the gap with negativity. And misunderstandings can easily become the death zone in relationships. And if we don't deal with these things immediately, they become splinters. And these splinters fester. And after a while, they get infected and they cause a major problem. But it's not really a problem. It's really just a misunderstanding. And misunderstandings are normal. You may not be able to tell this by looking around today, but we're all different. And because we're all different, because we speak differently and we hear differently, that means there's going to be miscommunication. And if there's going to be miscommunication, there's going to be misinterpretation, which means there's going to be misunderstanding. And that is why clear, immediate, open, honest communication is so important. This is what you said. Is this what you really meant? It's a misunderstanding. The second mountain is the me first attitude. Whereas selfishness is the sin beneath all sin, pride is the root of selfishness. And pride is one of the things that the Lord hates. In fact, it's at the very top of his list. Because pride overestimates our own worth and underestimates the worth of other people. And pride, when we're reading the Bible, has us see the Bible as a microscope to point out the sins of other people instead of being a mirror that's revealing our own sin. And so many people go into the scriptures and they're looking at the scriptures as a microscope to point out other people's wrongs and not as a mirror to point out our own wrongs. So let me break this down to you. The Bible is a mirror. In fact, marriage is a mirror. Having kids is a mirror. But instead of pointing out other people's problems, we need to see the Bible for what it is. It's a mirror revealing to us our own, but pride doesn't allow us to see that. In Luke chapter 22, Luke records his account of the Last Supper. And Jesus is in this moment sitting around the table with the apostles, and he's telling them what's about to take place. He has a loaf of bread. He breaks it, says, "This is my body. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to give my body for you." He passes around a cup of wine. He says, "I'm about to shed my blood for you. And it's going to come at the expense of one of you." So he's like, "I'm going to be beaten, and I'm going to shed blood, and one of you are going to betray me to cause this." And they start to ask which one it is, and there's a little conversation that takes place. But then Luke says in verse 24, something crazy takes place. In the middle of this conversation about Jesus going to be betrayed to the point of death, his body broken and blood being shed, it says in verse 24, a dispute also arose among them as to which of them was considered the greatest. You guys don't find that funny? Jesus is like, "I'm going to be broken and I'm going to shed some blood." And they're like, "Jesus, that's kind of sad and all, but that means you're going to go to heaven sooner. And if you're going to go to heaven sooner, could you put in a good word for me when you get there? Could you reserve a crown for me?" That's what's taking place in this moment. They don't really care about him. They're cared about themselves. Now, before you get too angry, can we acknowledge that you and I do the very same thing every day? Can I preach to the men in the room? Because I know when I start talking about relationships, y'all men just tune me out. You're like, "Oh, he's going to beat us over the head again." No, I'm for the men. I'm for the men. So pay attention, men. I'm about to help y'all out. All right. When the ladies gather us around for a family picture, right? Because like the first hour and a half of anywhere we go, we got to be taking some family pictures, right? But I have learned over the years, these aren't really family pictures. These are pictures of Miss Amy, and the rest of us are just in this picture. You know what I'm saying? Because let's ask this. Ladies, who was the first person y'all looking at? No, you looking at you. That's how we determine if this is a good picture or not, right? One time I just turned sideways. She's like, "Oh, that's a great picture. That's your best side." I'm like, "Yeah, you ain't even looking at me. I'm not even combing my hair for the next picture we taking." Why would I do that anyway, right? But you're looking at you. Let's just admit, we are prideful people. Just listen to how many times we use the word "I" in a day, in a sentence. And at the center of the word pride is the letter I. And pride is what caused the angel Lucifer to turn into the devil. 66%, 2/3 of the angel is in heaven fell to hell because of pride. And what we see through the scriptures, pride is the deadbolt that blocks heaven's blessings upon our life, whereas humility is the hinge in which the heavens open. Let's read on here, verse 13. I'm going to read it to you out of the King James because I think it's so poetic. "You call me master and Lord, and you say, 'Well, for so I am.' If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, nor he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If you know these things," happy. Everybody say happy. Happy are you if you do them. Pastor Robert Madu preached a killer message about pride. In that, he says, pride is the silent killer that destroys marriages, that wrecks relationships, it tears apart families, it crumbles churches, it kills companies, it causes us to hold on to bitterness so we refuse to forgive. It is the reason family members have not talked in years. And pride not only comes in the form of superiority, because I know some of you are thinking like, oh, the prideful people are the ones who wear sunglasses into the building. Like those are prideful people, right? But I think pride comes in the form of inferiority as well. You ever met those people that are like humbly proud or pridefully humble? You ever met those people? I mean, like, no one cares about me. No one ever calls me. No one ever understands me. No one ever checks on me. No one ever thinks I'm pretty. Can I tell you something? Anytime you hear yourself saying me, it's pride. And pride only cares about me being the center of my world. It just comes in different forms. And humility and pride manifest themselves in how we respond to these situations. And Robert Madu asks 4 questions, and I want to have you ask them today, is how do you respond to criticism? When somebody criticizes you, do you get defensive? Do all of a sudden you begin to deflect it? Do you deny it? When somebody criticizes you, do you get defeated or deflated where like it not only does it ruin your moment, it ruins your day, it ruins your week, it ruins your month. If somebody is criticizing you, it ruins your whole year. Well, that's pride, because humble people can learn something from everyone and they can extract value in everything. Here's the second question. How do you respond to rejection? Now, we all hate rejection. Let's admit that. But just because you're rejected does not mean that your day has to be ruined. So how do you respond to rejection? Here's a third question that he asked. How do you respond to advice? You see, prideful people don't want advice. They want confirmation. They want to hear their opinion in someone else's voice. That's why I don't do any counseling anymore. Because like you just want me to reaffirm what you already believed when you came walking in the room, and I ain't going to do that. So I'm not a counselor, I'm a consultant. I ain't gonna do any listening, I'm gonna do a whole lot of talking. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. And the reason why is because they say only 13% of counseling is effective. Because 87% of the people know what they ought to do when they come in the door, they just ain't doing it. I ain't got time for that, so I'm just moving on. Because humble people, they listen to advice, they're open to feedback. Prideful people are not. Here's the next one. How do you respond to praise? Let's get real. Y'all want to get real up in here? Let's get real. How much do you like being liked? Psychiatrists are scrambling to do the research on the impact of social media on the brain. They say we have this incessant need to be praised. The younger generation, the Generation Z, spends about 7 hours and 22 minutes a day on their phone. They have this incessant need to be praised. They need validation and affirmation from people they don't even know. And the longing for likes on our social media, they say, is almost the same as taking a hit of cocaine. That you and I check our phones every 10 minutes. And we've developed this thing called phantom vibration syndrome. That you and I actually think that our phone is buzzing in our pocket. And when that happens, all of a sudden our legs start shaking and we get the little shakes, the tweaks. Now check this out. They say it's the same as taking a hit of cocaine and dopamine is being released into your system. Now check this out. When you realize that it's not your phone, it's just a nervous twitch, now all of a sudden you crash. So you go from the highest of highs, dopamine, to the lowest of lows, like I'm popular. No, I'm not. So it goes from dopamine to now depression. So how do you respond to criticism, rejection, advice, praise? So I have a little thing. Criticism, rejection, advice, praise are this way. How do you respond to the crap of life? Because that will tell you whether or not you are prideful. And humility, listen to me, is not a destination that we arrive at, but it's a direction in which we are traveling to. Here's the third mountain, mistakes. Everyone has been hurt by someone else. And it's easy to build a mountain of bitterness around your heart to protect yourself from ever being hurt again. But bitterness kills the soul. It locks love out, and you need love to grow. Listen to me. If you're here for the first time, or you're here for the first time in a long time, or maybe it's just been a few times, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Can I be honest with you guys and girls? I'm going to say something that you don't like at some point. At some point, I'm going to offend you. In fact, it may be multiple times. At some point in me speaking to you, you're not going to like what I'm saying to you. You're going to be hurt by people at church. You know why? Because we're imperfect people. I'm going to hurt you, and chances are it'll probably be accidental or incidental, and I will never know because you'll never give me the opportunity to make it right. And you need to know that you're going to hurt me. But just because you hurt me, and just because multiple people, many people have hurt me throughout the years, I'm not giving up on church because I've been hurt by people at church. The same way I'm not going to give up on driving because I've had a bad experience with a car or two. The same reason I'm not going to give up on eating out at restaurants because I've had a few bad meals. The same reason that I hope that Miss Amy doesn't give up on our marriage if I say something mean to her, or I don't give up on our marriage because she says something mean to me. So ask yourself, when these moments when somebody says something that's hurtful to you, was that incidental? Was that intentional? Or was it just accidental? Maybe I should ask them, have I talked to them or have I just talked about them? Because there is a difference. And would I want that person to walk out on me if the shoe were on the other foot? Because spiritual maturity and emotional health says that you and I should be able to overlook an offense. Just because something is said that is offensive does not mean that you have to be offended. And don't you and I think that we live in a world that is constantly looking to be offended instead of overlooking the offense? I mean, for goodness sakes, we get offended about everything. 2 weeks ago, on a Monday morning, I'm about to get in trouble in here today. I got like 6 emails the Monday after Mother's Day. I didn't even preach on Mother's Day. I was interviewing a bunch of people. I was gone the week before about how I offended everybody. Like, I didn't know what I did. But you know what Proverbs 19:11 says? It is to the glory of a man to overlook an offense. We're all going to say something offensive. It's backgrounds, it's history, it's heart, it's personality, all these different things, but you don't have to be offended. Here's what an emotional, healthy person does or a spiritually mature person does. They don't look at the scene, they look at the story. You see what we're talking about? Let me explain it this way. I have a 12-year history with many of you guys. And I ask that you don't walk out on me because of 12 seconds of ignorance, or 12 minutes of arrogance, or 12 minutes of anger. Because we have a 12-year history, what I'm saying is don't walk out on me, and I'm using me, but all of you, in any relationship just because of a scene, or a page, or a chapter. Let's look at the story. And many people are walking out on relationships with family members or longtime friends because of 12 seconds or 12 minutes. Look at this story. This person's been good to me. This person's loved me. This person's cared for me. We've been through the thick and thin. It is to the glory of a man to overlook an offense, so you have to be willing to overlook it. You see, anger doesn't kill relationships. Yesterday's anger brought into today kills relationships, because that develops bitterness and unforgiveness. And you can't let anger turn into bitterness. And if you hold on to hurt, listen to me, you're the one who hurts. Because if it consumes you, it will control you. Do you know that Satan wants to divide the Lord's house and he wants to divide your house? Don't take the bait to hate. Don't let hurt turn into hate. Do we have anybody in here that's been married 20 years? Let's give it up for the people with 20 years. Amy and I, 21 years. Awesome. Mike and Melissa, how long have you guys been married now? 39 years. 39 years. Do we have anybody that's been married over 50 years in this? We had 59 earlier today, 59 and 55. 39. And I want you guys to be honest, because it'd be easy to be silly. But has there been moments in those 39 years when you didn't know if you were going to make it? Yeah. You know, the scriptures are when we stand in front of the pastor and we stand in front of the people, we say for better or for worse. Has there been any moment when you thought to yourself, till death do us part, I'm about to kill this person. That's going to be the only thing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, I took that oath seriously, so I'm going to kill him. That's how we're going to get out of this. That's how he's always in a cast or something, a humilist, right? The word wed means what comes from weld. It's to appear too stubbornly, refuse leads to banging together of two precious pieces of metal by fire and trial, right? And you would say that in life that there's been a lot of that in 39 years. But aren't you glad you made it? You wouldn't change it for anything. Aren't you glad you didn't give up in the moments that you wanted to give up? Because isn't that true in just about every single relationships? The fruit grows in the valley. There's highs and there's lows, and you got to understand that, because when the end is clear, you realize that it's the people who are near to me that really matter. You know, relationships aren't for wimps. So let me give you 3 ways to keep relational mountains manageable. And this first one I wrestle with because I know how people's mind goes, and I know that I'm going to get some hate emails over this. It's just crazy the world that we live in, that I have to fret over every single word that I use. And it's the word acceptance. Now let me explain to you what I'm referring to here when I'm talking about acceptance. As I'm talking about accepting them as a child of God. I'm not talking about their sinful lifestyle or anything like that. I'm talking about I accept you just because of the fact that God created you in his image. Doesn't mean I like your sinful lifestyle, like the sin that you're partaking. I'm talking about I accept you as a human being, not about what the human is doing. You see, some of life's biggest problems come over little differences. Don't bite the hand that feeds you just because you don't like the taste of this meal. Romans 15 says, accept one another, then just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. In John 13:2, the devil had already prompted Judas to betray Jesus. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet. Now listen, I want to live my life like Jesus, but I don't know if I could wash Judas's feet before he betrayed me. I ain't doing that. Maybe God would give me grace for the moment, but you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, he is washing Judas's feet when Judas is about to take those same clean feet, walk out the door and betray him. And this is where we need God's power. And true love accepts people for who they are, where they are, but does not leave them where they are. And our identity is not about what we do, it's about who God says we are. In Ephesians 4 says, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. You haven't accepted someone if you're always trying to change them. Now, that does not mean that you don't change for one another. We should change for the ones that we loved. In fact, I pray to God that over the past 21 years of marriage, I have changed for Miss Amy. You know what that's called? Maturity. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I'm becoming better. In fact, the spiritual term of that is sanctification. We can't rationalize our sins and say, well, you just need to accept me as I am. No, you can't be an inconsiderate jerk, an apathetic lover, or a short-tempered person and say, well, that's just the way God made me. No, that's called sin. It's called selfishness. It's called pride. And it's a two-way street where we both have to be willing to give 100% and learn to do this little thing called compromise. Because believe it or not, Amy would love for me to be more of a relaxed person. I don't know why, but she would love for me to relax more. I know you're always laughing, and that's offensive. But I'm a spiritually mature person. I'm going to overlook that. Because there are moments when I would like her to be more passionate, and I would like her to be more aggressive. And because we love one another, we do our best to please each other. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve did not have to cover up anything. They were naked. They were completely accepted. And you would admit that's the longing in every one of our hearts. But we're not in the Garden of Eden, are we? And because we're not in the Garden of Eden, it's not natural for me to accept people who are not like me. What's natural for me is to try and change people. It's natural for me to want to be around people who look like me and act like me. And you're like, why would that? Because it should be easier. Is this a safe crowd? Can I be vulnerable in this crowd? No emails come from this crowd, do they? It would be easier for me to pastor a church that looked like me and voted like me and dressed like me. But that's not a reflection of heaven. Nor is it a reflection of the people that Christ hung around. He hung around people who were nothing like him, and the people that were nothing like him loved being around him. You see, he didn't save us to hide from the world, to avoid the world, to condemn the world, or judge the world. He saves us, and then he sends us into the world to love the world tenderly and fiercely. He didn't save us to build this Christian subculture where we avoid everyone who isn't like us. And some of us are so worried about who's getting into heaven that we don't care who's going to hell, and we're riding people right out the church. That's not the way of Jesus. Jesus put Matthew the liberal, who had sold his soul to Rome, right next to Simon the zealot, the constitutionalist, who had sold out to Israel. He put them on the same team. He had to go through Samaria and talk with the adulterous woman who was mixed in race and religion. That's the way of Jesus. It's not easy, but it's heavenly. And every relationship should give us a glimpse of heaven. And for that to happen, I need God's help loving people with all their flaws, because I need God's help loving me with all of my flaws. Number 2, actions. A little love expressed in action makes a huge difference. Love must be shown to be known. And if you go through life only living to please yourself, you'll never know true love, because true love is vulnerable. It puts itself in awkward positions. Just like Jesus washing the disciples' feet, it serves not in word but in deed. So how could Jesus show love? Well, he washed their feet. How else could he show love? As he hung naked on a cross, beaten and bloodied and battered. In Romans 5:8, but God showed his love for us and demonstrated. He committed his love for us by sending Christ to die for us, in that while we were yet sinners. How can we do that? The first thing is consideration. Paul told the church at Philippi, let each of you not only look to your own interest, but also the interest of others. Do you look to meet the needs of other people before you look to meet your own? I know I tease about this quite often, about the people working for me, but the reality is I work for my team. The reality is I work for them. Because if they win, I win. And if I win and we win, the whole church wins. As a husband, I look to meet Miss Amy's needs first. As a dad, I look to meet my kids' needs first. But the problem in most relationships is conditional love. I'll meet your needs if you meet my needs, preferably first. If I like it, I'll do it for you. If I don't like it, it makes me uncomfortable. No, I ain't doing that for you. But relationships work best when both parties say, listen, I just want to serve you. Because marriage is a serving contest. Marriage is the expert becoming an expert at meeting each other's needs. That's what consideration is. Because I love you, I want to meet your needs as you are meeting my needs. And the great paradox of all this is that you're giving yourself away, that it's all returned to you. Let's talk about collaboration. It's different than cooperation. When Jesus knew we only had 1 month to live, he prayed that we would be one. The Bible says that when male and female, man and woman join together in marriage, that they become one. Jesus also prayed for the church to be one. Christians choose churches based upon how their needs are being met at that place. And then all of a sudden, because of that consumer mentality, churches begin to divide under these small nuances. We can accomplish so much in the kingdom of God if we just put aside our logos and our egos. Now, you hear me say this before, but we're not going to talk about other churches here. We're not going to talk about other pastors here. We're on the same team. We collaborate. Blood, sweat, and tears. Let me tell you this, Christians, we need your collaboration too. If you got a gift and talent, what you do, then we need you to serve and volunteer. The next one is commitment. The average millennial, which I found something interesting this week. You guys want to hear it? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just going to tell you anyway, Gary. Check this out. The millennial, the age group has changed. Now they consider millennials to be born from 1977 to 1997. And the reason why is because it's tech dependent versus tech savvy. So the Generation Z, they're tech dependent. That's all they know. The generation before, millennials, 1977 to 1997, are tech savvy. We know technology, but we're not dependent upon it. We still know how to read and write without a computer telling us how to read and write. Calculators, right? Now here's what's funny. If you're born between 1977 and 1980, you're considered a geriatric millennial. I'm a geriatric millennial. But here's the thing. Here's what's so interesting about that. The average millennial works at a company for 3 to 5 years. They only work at a church for 18 months. But check this out. They believe that they should be promoted every 2 years. HR departments are now starting to ignore applications of those who stay less than 3 years on the job because they say it costs a lot of money to train these new people, and they're not adding any financial value to the company for 2 years. Economists are making the case that loyal customers will eventually make more money than talented ones. And it's actually a biblical principle. In Psalms 92, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. The psalmist says they flourish because they are planted. In other words, they put down roots. And if you don't put down roots, you're never going to have sustaining fruit. The cedar tree is known for its durability. When Solomon built his temple, he made almost all of it, the columns and posts and beams and roof out of cedar because it was designed to last for centuries. Miss Amy and I, the geriatric millennials, when we got married, her grandma gave us a cedar chest. Was anybody else a geriatric millennial? Well, that was part of the thing. Like you got married, somebody gave you a hope chest or a cedar chest, right? And we still have that today because that's where we put our valuables because it's durable, it's life-giving, it smells good. And that's what he's talking about here is those who plant themselves are durable because they've developed a life-giving root system. And most people fail to get promoted or fail to see any fruit in a relationship because they lack the patience needed to stay planted. Commitment is hard. It is so much easier to run when things get tough. But on their deathbed, most people look back and say, man, I wish I would have stuck it out. Let's move on here. Philippians 2:13. For God is working in you, giving you the desire. Everyone say desire. To obey him and the power. Everybody say power. To do what pleases him. I want you to notice that it says desire and power. In every relationship that we have, we should be asking, Lord, give me the desire to meet their needs and give me the power to do it. And the reason why we need supernatural desire and supernatural power is because it's not natural. It's really not natural. So we got to pray for the desire and we got to pray for the power. Here's the last one, number 3, absolution, which just means forgiveness. Colossians 3, get along with each other and forgive each other. We get the power to forgive people in our lives who have hurt us when we look to the cross. Because you'll never forgive anyone more than Christ has already forgiven you. And I think we have a wrong view of forgiveness today. Because we're like, I don't want to forgive that person. I don't want to forgive the offender because that means letting them off the hook. No. Forgiveness is for you. It's not letting them off the hook. It's getting yourself out of prison. Forgiveness is our weapon. And when we don't forgive other people, we are allowing them to have power over our lives, and most of them don't know or they don't even care. But when we forgive them, we are the ones who are set free and can move on with our life. But Pastor Daniel, you don't know what happened to me. No, I don't, and I'm so sorry that it did happen to you. Say, how can I forgive and move on? So you can be set free. And so you can learn to love again. But forgiveness is a decision, but it's also a process. You got to make the decision. I'm going to forgive. Lord, I don't feel like forgiving, but I'm going to forgive today. It is a decision, and I'm going to have to make this decision every single day. The second one is I'm going to be forgiving. It's a determination. I'm going to pray every single day. God, give me the strength to forgive this person and cover with the blood of Jesus what I can't forgive so that I don't even see it anymore. And then the third is when there's true forgiveness or I forgave, the decisiveness of that, it may not come until heaven. I was reading a book this week about spiritual warfare. And the author said, earth is the go-between, the place between heaven and hell. That's earth. And that's why there's so much warfare. That's why there's so much tension. There's a constant battle between heaven and hell in our relationships. And when somebody hurts you and you forgive them, you're bringing down heaven. But when someone hurts you and you hang on to that, you're bringing up hell. And in every relationship, in every situation, you can invite heaven or you can allow hell to invade. And if you're in this go-between, you find yourself wrestling, don't look at the one who hurts you. You need to look at the one who can heal you. And you're inviting heaven into that relationship. In 1 John 3:16, this is how we know what love is. That Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and our sisters. Christ showed us the power of love when he went to the cross, and he tells us to love others the same. Lay down our selfishness, lay down our desires, and meet the needs of those that we love first. You are placed on this earth to love, and you are not living until you're loving. And love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. So let me ask you, who do you need to love completely today? Who do you need to show the full extent of your love? Is there a relationship that you've given up on that maybe you need to rekindle or revisit? Is there an action that you need to do? Is there absolution that you need to offer? Is there someone that you need to accept? Because John 13:1 says he loved them to the end. If you only had 30 days to live, would you love to the end?